The Supreme Court rules against Trump's decision to enforce the law, and John Bolton gets hit from all sides for his revealing new memoir. I'm Mike Huckabee with the breakdown. You may remember when President Obama created DACA in 2012 by way of executive memorandum. It allowed people who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children to live and work here, but it didn't provide a path to becoming a citizen. Because this ran counter to existing U.S. law, this was in effect the executive branch not just doing the job of the legislative branch, but actively undoing it by overruling existing legislation. Obama himself had said previously, at least 10 times publicly, that he didn't have the unilateral authority to make such a decision. And yet, he went ahead and did it anyway. Despite President Obama's bloating of government power, the Supreme Court had nothing to say about the overreach at that time. However, now that President Trump's administration is attempting to relieve the bloating by rescinding the illegal DACA order, the Supreme Court has decided that they now do have an opinion on the matter. In a 5-4 decision with Chief Justice John Roberts joining the liberal members to author the opinion, the court said the Department of Homeland Security's move to eliminate the program was done in a, quote, arbitrary and capricious manner, end quote, although they didn't rule on the merits of the program itself. Roberts wrote in his opinion, "We don't decide whether DACA or its rescission are sound policies. The wisdom of those decisions is none of our concern. We address only whether the agency complied with the procedural requirement that it provide a reasoned explanation for its action." So, Justice Roberts, let's get this straight. President Obama can create a program that even he admitted he didn't have legal authority to do, and all future presidents are required to continue it? 2 sets of rules, depending on who you are, is what Justice Roberts basically has ruled. Well, the left loves it when they get their way. I suppose we all do, but they seldom give thought to the idea of long-term ramifications. In the end, everyone loses with this decision. Because DACA was created by the executive branch, it's not really law. That can only be created by the legislative. President Trump gave Congress 6 months to write up something legitimate to take the place of DACA, but they've never done it. So since Congress has refused to do its job, they forfeited some of their power to the executive, and we've lost some of the balance of power that's so core to the survival of our republic. Then to make matters worse, in a situation where President Trump has full authority to strike down DACA, the Supreme Court has now propped themselves up over the executive to further upset the balance. Hey, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I hope you'll consider hitting that little bright red button below. It only takes a second. And then hit the notification bell right next to it so that YouTube will let you know when we've got more videos up for you. Well, the other big news this week comes from former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. Months ago, when Bolton first announced his upcoming tell-all memoir about his time in the President administration, the left couldn't contain their glee. Par for the course for them, I suppose. But it seems things aren't quite panning out for Bolton the way he probably would have hoped. In his book, The Room Where It Happened, Bolton doesn't hold back on painting President Trump as an utter buffoon with no clue about how things work, unfamiliar with basic facts, and as it pertains to foreign policy, motivated by politics and what will serve his own interest. But according to The Hill, Bolton's allegations landed with a thud among lawmakers in both parties. And he and his hotly anticipated book have become a target of scorn by critics all across the political spectrum. When Bolton was asked, he refused and said he'd sue if subpoenaed. Instead, he saved it for a book, tweeted Representative Adam Schiff of California, who oversaw most of the impeachment hearings as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And I quote, "Bolton may be an author, but he's no patriot," Schiff added. I, for one, am shocked by Representative Schiff's response to this. Can you believe that he's not biting on the clear opportunity to slam President Trump using a former staffer? Maybe there's hope for the man who cried, "Collusion!" and did it so often. Well, he brings up a good point. If what Bolton writes is true, He did the country an incredible disservice by not testifying before Congress under oath if he believed in the ineptitude of the man holding the presidency. As it stands, the fact that he held off testifying as much under oath, instead just wrote a book, that's a pretty good indicator that Bolton is full of it, has it out for President Trump after being ousted for being ineffectual, and he's trying to make some big bucks so he can perhaps retire to Aruba. In reference to Bolton's book deal, Representative Doug Collins echoed a similar sentiment in a tweet yesterday, saying, $2 million apparently is all it took for John Bolton to sell off what little credibility he had left. Yep, Congressman, that's the going exchange rate for 30 pieces of silver these days. In characteristic fashion, the president had his own words about the book. He said, "Wacko John Bolton's exceedingly tedious book is made up of lies and fake stories, said all good about me in print until the day I fired him. A disgruntled, boring fool who only wanted to go to war. Never had a clue, was ostracized, and happily dumped. What a dope." What'd you really think, Mr. President? Well, I've got my own source about Bolton's allegations, and from a source I trust completely, my daughter Sarah. She spent far more time with the president than John Bolton ever did. And she was, in fact, in most of the very meetings that John Bolton wrote about. She stands by the president and is deeply disgusted and disappointed in Bolton's bitter book based on his getting fired. By the way, she's got her own firsthand account of life inside the Trump White House. I think it'll tell the real story from someone who did see it firsthand. I hope you'll read it when it comes out in September. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. And leave a like and a comment while you're doing all that. Be sure to join us for the live stream of the next episode of Huckabee tomorrow night. And right now, that's it for this edition of Breakdown. I'm Mike Huckabee.